Hello and welcome to another Animation Notes tutorial. In this video I'm going to show you how you can create this video effect that you're currently watching using the marching squares algorithm that we've already looked at in a previous tutorial. If you haven't seen the previous video, maybe you should check it out first. In that video I explain a little bit about how the marching squares algorithm works and how to use it in Animation Notes in Blender. And now in this video, we're going to use it for a sort of a 2D effect, a video effect. So let's jump right in. All right, here I am in Blender. This is my startup scene. You maybe know my startup file. You can get it from Patreon. In fact, I'm not going to need a lot from this startup file for this. So I'm just going to disable it here. I do need a camera. Where's the camera? Here. And I'm gonna take this. Oh, you know what? Screencast keys, so you can see what I'm typing. I'm gonna put the track 2 into the center, the focus, and then Alt-G the camera and GZ up on the Z-axis. So now the camera is currently looking at nothing. I'm gonna switch over to Eevee because I'm gonna use Eevee for this effect. And I'm gonna set my resolution here to 1080 so that we have a 16:9 aspect ratio here. All right, now the first thing I want to do is plug in an image so that we have the reference. I'm just gonna go Shift A image is plane. Now the effect is being put onto a video, or the video is actually the source for the effect basically. But I found that if I use a video file, like an MP4 file, sometimes Blender has problems with refreshing the current frame if you change the frames in your timeline. So it's better to plug in an image sequence. And here I have this image sequence, which is actually rendered using Blender. And it is my little my crispy animation where the YouTube logo rotates and then the username comes in. So I'm just going to take one of those images so I can see what it looks like. I can now move my camera in a little. I'm going to switch off depth of field so that we have a sharp, nice image. Cool. I think I want to move this over a little bit so that the whole thing is in the middle. I'm going to use this, or actually the entire image sequence, for that effect. Now, how do we use this effect? Of course, we're going to need animation nodes. So let's go to animation nodes, create a new node tree, switch off always and the changes. So we're going to use marching squares, right? So Shift A, marching squares. We can just search for it, marching squares. Here it is. So let's first set up the marching squares node. I'm gonna go to, yeah, size is good. X divisions, we're gonna need a lot of divisions. 50-50, or actually 16:9. Let's do 160:90, right? So we have it matching our image here, our resolution. Now width and length we're going to have to play with, but we can only do that if we plug in a 3D viewer. Mesh, actually this node has a grid points output and we're going to put that in here. So here you can see our grid of points for the marching squares node, and now we can use these sliders here to just simply align the grid with our image. So change the width, change the length, bring it in. Well, that's a lot of points, but so kind of like this, right? Doesn't have to be exact. The points are just used by the algorithm to find the contours, the borders between different grayscale values, basically. Okay, so bring this maybe down a little, like so. And then we have this grid. I'm think I'm gonna move my camera because kind of outside of the view here now, because sadly when I rendered this YouTube thing, I rendered it not centered. So, okay, now here we have the grid. Now we're gonna need curves again, just like in the last video. How do we do this? We want a spline create from edges node. So we need vertices and the edges, and we get that from the mesh. Now the marching squares node creates a mesh. I've already explained this. We can get the mesh info of that mesh and plug the vertices in here and the edges in here. Now we can create splines. So we want to output splines, spline object output, plug that in here, enable it, create a new object, which is now called, where is it? Kind of in the wrong collection here. Let me move those to my scene collection. I want that out here. So here is now the target, right? Target, splines. Let's give it some bevel depth. Maybe we can already see where they are. No, because we have nothing in the Falloff here. Now in the last video we used noise, like three-dimensional noise for the Falloff. In this video we want the Falloff to be driven by our video. And for that, we need the texture Falloff. So Shift A, Falloff. There should be a texture Falloff in here. Yep, we plug that in there. And now we need to create a texture that we can plug in here. So we go over to the textures panel over here and create a new texture based on image or movie. Right. Now we're gonna open the image sequence. So this guy, open image sequence. What do we have? Single image. No, we have to switch this to image sequence. We have 150 frames. We start with frame 1, offset 0. Sounds good. Automatic refresh or auto refresh is so if you change the position on your timeline, Blender loads the appropriate image from that image sequence for that frame. So you want to enable that. And here we can see we have this. Okay, do we have alpha sampling colors? Oh, here we have sRGB, alpha straight, view as render. I don't know why this is black and white now, but let's see if we can figure out what's going on. Yeah, so this is black and white now. Why? That something that you've done before now doesn't quite work. Saturation is 1. Color ramp. Color ramp, is that the, oh, color ramp. Enable the color ramp first. Oh, okay. No, we don't want that. We just want this. So now we have a texture. Now this texture has really nothing to do with our object in here, with this plane that we have in here. It's just an image texture that you can use like any other texture in Blender, and we can use it in here. So what is this called? Oh, I used a texture that I already had in here. Doesn't matter. I'm just gonna call this, let's call it video. And we're gonna plug that video texture in here, and you can already see something is happening. So our marching squares is already creating curves. Cool. Now we want to change this mesh a little, because we get a curve for each segment. We really don't want that. Oh, first of all, let's switch this to spline per branch. So what do we want in here? We want to weld together all of these segments, and we have to do that in a bit of a weird way. We have to actually create a mesh output. So plug the mesh into an output, create a new object, target 1. Where is target 1 now? It's also in here. Awesome. Move to scene collection. I want this to be enabled. Okay, now we actually don't need target 1. We don't need to see it or anything. We just need it and enable mesh so that on target 1 I can now add a weld modifier. I have to go like this, okay. And then where's the weld modifier? Here. So now this is welding together points that are close by. And in order to use that now, we need the mesh input. So we take this object, we use the modifiers, and here we have the vertex locations. And on this node, we can also enable the edge indices, which is what we need in here. Now we don't need this anymore. Okay, so now we have this, and it's looking cool, but it doesn't quite match. So the scale of the texture has nothing to do now with our plane, like I said before. So now we have to kind of match up the image in our scene with that texture coordinates. Okay, how can we change the texture coordinates basically? This texture Falloff node has an input, which is the transform input here, which is not enabled by default, but we can enable it here. And now we can actually transform our texture. And we can do that with a matrix compose, right? So we can change location and scale, plug that in here, and now we have control here. And we can make sure that this is aligned. We can just eyeball this a little bit. So here we can move that over. Let's set the scale to 0.5. And 150. So we have 150 frames. And in the middle here somewhere we have the logo and we have the video. Now of course this doesn't match, but we can fix this because our plane in here, which is now showing this logo here, we can go to the shader editor where this image is plugged in, and we can set this image to be an image sequence as well. It has 150 frames, frame 92, yeah, that looks good. Offset automatic refresh, cool. Now we can actually see what the animation nodes texture Falloff marching squares sees. So when I move my timeline here, I can see the real image, and we have the marching squares thing on top of it. But there is something wrong. We can use this grid offset here, which is also not enabled by default, but you can just switch it on and bring up the grid of dots that the marching square is based on. Bring that up a little so that it's in front of our video here. Okay, now this looks cool already. So the marching squares is working. Now, you can see, if I just flip through here, we get this. Now how do we make it look a little bit more interesting? So first of all, I think I'm gonna make this even thinner. So something like this, just to have thin outlines. Also, of course, this target object, which is now those lines, is a real curve, and we can do stuff with it. For example, we can up the resolution a little bit, and we can assign a color to it or a material to it. So let's I'm gonna call it neon, and I'm gonna switch this over to an emission shader with, how about I switch this to shader editor. Where are you? Oh, glass. I want emission. Okay, strength, I don't know, 10. And with Eevee and the bloom effect, we already get this cool effect that looks like it's lighting up. Okay, now how can we randomize this stuff a little bit? How about we want to, while this animation plays, we want to flip the colors around and make it all crazy and wild looking. Of course, we can do this in animation nodes. So first of all, we need the animation input time info. Then we need some colors. How about we create a list? List create more color. Awesome. Now let's plug in a red color with full brightness. Let's do a green color. Then we can add some more inputs here. One of those, and then another one, maybe blue, and this one isn't quite bright enough. And let's do another one. Let's do purple like this. Okay, so we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 colors, and now we have to assign, for each frame we create a random number. So shift a number, math, number, how about random? Random is good. And we plug the frame into the seed. So we get a different random number for each frame between 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. Between 0 and 4. Okay, now we take a list, get element. Get element. From this list, we want this element. That gives us a color. So if I plug in a viewer here, it shows RGB, and if I change my frame now, we get different. So for each frame now, we get one of these colors here. This one is kind of boring. Let's make this one yellow. Okay, now how do we assign this color to our target object? There, of course, is a node in animation nodes, which is the set. What is it called? Set cycles material output. That's what we want. Although we're using Eevee, but we want the cycles material output, which is basically you can assign values to nodes in a node tree of a material. So which one do we want? What is it called? Target material. Oh, I called it neon, right? So this is the material. Which node? The emission node. The emission node has 2 inputs in the node tree, in the material node tree. We want to assign the color, and here we go. So now if I change the frame, each frame now gets a different random color from our color palette here. Cool. So we have that. Now, what I also did in a previous animation was to randomize everything else, basically. The X divisions, the Y divisions, the threshold. So, you know what? Maybe we could make this look more interesting if we create a list here. So list, create, float. And we do 0.25 and 0.65. And plug that list into the threshold here. So we should get not just one, right? So this is just one. We get one border based on the brightness value of the input texture. And by plugging in a list here, we can get multiple borders between different thresholds of the thing that this marching squares node is based on. And currently it's based on texture. And in the last video it was based on noise. So now we have 2. This looks a lot better already. Maybe set this to 0.5 and then do another 1.75. I don't know if this looks good. Let's see. Maybe this is too high and never shows up. Let's do 0.4, something like this. Okay. So this is our animation. And like I said, we can now use the time info to create random numbers for the X divisions and the Y divisions, which gives us the resolution for the marching nodes squares. So these dots here, all of those. And by randomizing this through the animation, we can get really wild, crazy. Sometimes you get a frame where the resolution is so small that it's just like a few lines. And sometimes maybe you have a lot of divisions for the random squares node. And then you get like really nice round lines. You can also randomize these numbers here, so you don't want the thresholds to be in the same spots all the time, since the video and the grayscale values are basically always in the same range here with this video. So you might want to randomize this. And I have this screenshot here for you, which is, you can see, it's very similar looking. Which is one of the animation node setups that I had for one of my demo videos. And here you can see I'm doing exactly what I just explained. I'm randomizing, using the frame, randomizing some numbers with some factors to change the X and the Y divisions. I'm randomizing the thresholds here. I only have 2 in this case. Here I have the colors and the random numbers. This node is actually not used, but this is the same setup, so I'm taking a random number to pick a color. And this is exactly the same setup that we have here, just with more random numbers. But if we render this out now, we get this cool looking effect. This is awesome. All you really have to do now is plug in a different video. So really the most complicated part of this whole thing is to align the grid or the texture coordinates of the texture with the image so that it matches the size and the proportions of whatever you want to render, and overlay that render onto your real image. So let me just go back to Blender quick. Right, so in this case, you wouldn't render out this image. So you would hide this image and you would just render this on transparent. And since this is Eevee, renders out really quickly, and then you can just take those transparent images or that transparent image sequence that you're creating and overlay it in whatever video software that you use. Cool, I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. If you create something really cool looking with this effect, please tag me. I would love to see what you can come up with. The blend file, of course, is available over on patreon.com/ChrisP. Thanks for watching. Have a good one. Chris P out.